peyote and psilocybin, and a lot of non-drug techniques like yoga techniques like asana, pranayama, and Sufi exercises, especially the heart chakra exercises. And for about 3 years, I was trying every new brainwave machine that came on the market. And I gave up the brainwave machine research at the point they were coming out with 5 or 6 new ones every month. And I had reached the point where I couldn't be sure what was the result of the latest machine I tried, what was the result of the machine I tried the week before, the delayed result, what was the cumulative effect, and what was the individual effect. And I've been doing a lot of work with neuro-linguistic programming in recent years, and I've always had a tendency to recast verbally anything that seems insoluble, paradoxical, or unbearable to me by examining it with the tools of general semantics so I can put it into a formulation where I can find I can do something about it. Most problems exist because the verbal formula you put them in creates the problem.
Can you give me an example?
For instance, right now I can't get around without a walker and a wheelchair. It depends on how I verbally formulate that. I started out by saying, right now, did you notice that? I didn't notice it myself, but that's part of the programming I'm giving. I'm not assuming this condition is permanent. I'm assuming this is a temporary condition which, since it was cured once before, it can be cured again. I learned to walk twice. I can learn to walk a third time, and I'm doing better every day. That's a very practical, nitty-gritty example, very meaningful to me right now. But take an example from the heights of intellect. For about 100 years, physicists were arguing whether light travels as discrete particles or whether it travels in waves like sound or water. And there were experiments that supported both theories. So there were arguments back and forth for a long time. Is light waves or is it particles? In the 1920s, some joker whose name I don't remember coined the word wavicles. He said light travels as waves and particles. But this was a joke at the expense of other physicists, but a lot of them picked it up just to express their total bafflement at the fact the evidence just didn't seem to make sense. And then Niels Bohr came up with the Copenhagen interpretation, which underlies almost all my work. All my work, whatever I'm writing about it, basically comes from the point of view of the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is whatever model we make of the world, whatever reality tunnel we organize our perceptions into is not the world. It's a model we've made. So if some experiments support the particle model and some support the wave model, we shouldn't be astonished at that. It just shows our brain can construct two different patterns depending on which instruments we're using. To ask what light really is basically a meaningless question. Science can't answer that. Science can only answer questions like how does it register on this instrument and how does it register on that instrument. That's the way I look at psychology, sociology, and things in general, is in terms of what does this model include and what does it exclude. Nobody can make a model that includes everything, although all the dogmatists on the planet think they've done that. If you included everything, all you'd perceive is chaos. Or as Buckminster Fuller states the case very well, scenario universe is non-simultaneously apprehended. In other words, we do not perceive the whole universe, the whole space-time continuum at any one instant. If we did that, our brain couldn't handle all the information. We perceive it in cross-sections. And if you do Zen meditation or any type of yogic meditation, you'll see how long a minute is. You can't keep track of the millions or billions of signals. How many different signals are coming in that you usually don't notice? What I call model theism is making a model, then worshiping the model as if it were a god, and hating everybody who has a different model. Model theism is the idea that your universe has been simultaneously apprehended. That's impossible according to general relativity. It's non-simultaneously apprehended. So what you experience tomorrow, if it entirely fits your beliefs today, that's because you're not paying enough attention.
So speaking of models, it seems that your favorite psychological model comes from Dr. Timothy Leary. Is that correct?
Yes. The Eighth Circuit model, yes.
Could you describe for listeners the basics of this model?
I've done 2-day workshops on the 8th Circuit model, and I've done 1-hour lectures, and I've done 2-hour lectures. Let's see how brief I can condense it to without making it totally incomprehensible. Leary's basic assumption is that our personality or our interpersonal reactions result from genetic blueprints as modified by early imprints and later conditioning and learning and re-imprinting if we learn anything about re-imprinting. So that we start out with basically amoeboid floating consciousness recapitulating the beginning of life, and we have to bond to a mother or a mother substitute, depending on how lucky we are. If we're lucky, we get a mother. If we're not lucky, we imprint something else. There's a case in one of Robert Audrey's books, a giraffe whose mother was shot by hunters right after it was born, and the giraffe imprinted the jeep, and it followed the jeep around and tried to nurse from it, etc., treated the jeep as a mother. Now this shows the biological basis of the Jungian archetypes. Jeep has 4 wheels, sort of like the 4 legs of a giraffe. There was research where birds that brought from the Galapagos Islands, where there haven't been any predators in about 1 million years, were tested by having cardboard cutout kites in the shape of hawks fly over them, and they all crouched and tried to hide. So that archetype had existed in the birds' brains for over 1 million years when there were no predators around. They still had the archetype hawk meant danger. So we were born with archetypal images and desire to find the equivalent that we can attach to in the external world. Leary calls that the biosurvival circuit. I call it the oral biosurvival circuit, to emphasize the importance of the nursing experience. And the oral biosurvival circuit Leary conceives of as basically one-dimensional. You either imprint what I call an infophilic tendency in varying degrees, which means the world seems like a safe place and you keep on exploring more and more of it, or you imprint an infophobic reflex in which the world seems like a sinister and threatening place. In the extreme form, it's autism, where the whole external world is just turned off. It's too sinister to be dealt with.
So once you've imprinted, that's it?
Well, that's the general opinion. Leary's heresy, one of his heresies, was that imprints can be changed with strong psychedelics and the right type of program. Timothy was one of the most prestigious and respected psychiatrists and psychologists in the country when he started his LSD research. By the time that was closed down, he was the most disreputable. When the government started closing down LSD research, all the major researchers became, to quote a famous Irish saying,